Peace, this is Doug. I've got my circuit rhythm here, and what I want to do today is just talk a little bit about motion sequencing and parameter locking. So this is hopefully going to be the first in a little series of tutorials on the rhythm that are going to be what I'd call intermediate. So this isn't intended to be an introduction, and I'm going to assume that you know your way around the rhythm. So let's get started. When we talk about motion sequencing, what we're talking about is automation. So if I want the filter moving around for like a wah-wah effect, I can turn up the resonance a little bit, wiggle the cutoff, and if I record that motion so that the effect is part of my pattern, if I sequence it, then I'm motion sequencing. So the way that the rhythm handles this is pretty straightforward. While the sequencer is running, you just press record, turn the knob that controls the parameter that you want to automate. You press record again to exit, and you're good. If you decide you don't like what you did, then you can press record, hold clear, and turn the knob to the left, again, while the sequencer is running. And that clears the automation. Press record again to exit, and you're good. It's really simple, it's really well implemented, and you can do it with all of these parameters. But you can also do this while the sequencer isn't running. And if you do it this way, you can make precise changes to any parameter on a per step basis. In other words, the rhythm has its own version of parameter locking. To do that, you would start the same way. You'd press record. But if you just turn a knob when the sequencer isn't running, it's not really doing anything. Yeah, you're changing the value of the parameter, but the sequencer doesn't know that you want it to change at any specific moment in the pattern. So when you're not running the sequencer, you need to actually specify that moment. And you do that by pressing the step where you want that change to actually happen. And here we need to go off on a little tangent because we need to talk about the different pages that we have for editing a pattern. So obviously we have the pattern settings, and this controls, how long your pattern is, how fast it plays, what direction, etc. But we also have the sample and note pages. These do a lot of things, but for right now, all that matters is that when you press a step on one of these pages, you enter a note. And if you press a note that's already been entered, you delete it. However, if you go to the velocity, gate, or microstep pages, then what happens when you press a note is you play it. And this is because these pages are for editing notes and previewing any changes that you've made. So while you're on one of these pages, any parameter that's lit up top is a parameter that you can edit on a per step basis. So when you're in keyboard mode, that's going to mean every parameter. And when you're in slice mode, that's going to mean every parameter except for sample start and length, because those are now tied to the slices. So to get back to business, to do this step-based motion sequencing, I'm going to need to first press record and make sure that I'm on the velocity, gate, or microstep page. I'm going to use sample start for my example. Like I mentioned, the rhythm has a slice mode, but this is actually my preferred method of sample slicing, and I think that it's going to make the demonstration as clear as possible. So for this, I'm just going to use a drum line. I think it's from a war record. First thing I'm going to do is put some steps in. Now I'm locking the sample to every step, but that's not necessary. I'm doing it because I want to show you something a little later. So now what I can do is go to the velocity page. The first note is fine. I just want it to play from the beginning of the sample. But the second note, I want to hit on that snare. So there it is. But now check out what happens if I go to the third note. It plays from the second note's start point. And the same thing is actually true for the first note. This is important to keep in mind. You can set up your track however you want. You can assign whatever values you want for each parameter, but the rhythm only cares about the current value of those parameters. When the rhythm comes across a step that has another value locked, then that becomes the new current value. The rhythm doesn't remember or care what was there before. I came at the rhythm as a dig attack user, so this took some getting used to. And what I do now is just set the start and end points for every note, and that way I can just copy and paste them around. I know that this isn't the most straightforward way of chopping a sample, but I like it. And it comes with a bunch of advantages on the rhythm. Like right out the gate, I can use more than 16 slices for a sample. I'll have an easier time using sample flip since I'm not trying to fit different samples on the same slices. And I can still use the keyboard to pitch the sample, and that way I can get 3 octaves in either direction instead of just the one. But like I said, you can do this with any parameter that's lit up. So if you want to have a hi-hat with different levels of decay, this is where you would do it. You would just lock the slope. If you want to have a little low pass on some but not all of your kicks, this is how you would do it. So watch. I'll duplicate this kick here. I'm already recording. I'm already on the velocity page. And now what I can do is turn down the cutoff here and then bring it back here. So again, it's important to keep in mind that if you just want something to happen on one step, then you need to edit the next step as well. So if I want to close the filter on one step, then I need to remember to open it back up on the next one. Again, the rhythm only cares about what the current value is. So if you want it to go back to where it was before, you need to tell it where it was and tell it to go back there. And you do that by setting a new parameter lock. And if you want to get rid of a parameter lock, then you do it the same way you clear out motion sequencing. The difference here is that you first need to choose the step. So make sure that you're recording, make sure that you're on the velocity page or the gate or microstep page, press the note, and then press clear and turn the parameter down to the left. Here's something else to keep in mind. Let's say that you changed a bunch of parameters, but you decide that you want to delete the note entirely. Then you would need to actually clear the note out and not just delete it from the sample or note pages. And this is because the parameter changes and notes are 2 different things that can be on a step. But that also means that you can lock parameters to otherwise empty steps. You would just do the same set of operations to the empty steps. So you can do things like have the filter close and then open back up while the sample is playing. And if you want to preview how that's going to sound, you can put a note down, then go back to your velocity page, hit record, and then edit that. Then when you're done, you can just go back to your sample or note page and delete it. And if you're wondering if there is a parameter lock on any of the steps, what you can do is just hit record and then press the step. Because as you probably noticed, the rhythm will show you that there is a parameter lock in place by lighting up the parameter that's locked in red. And you can duplicate the empty steps the same way you would the steps with notes on them. All right, so let's hear how this sounds in practice. So first thing here, I need to take these notes and open the filter back up. And now I've got the sample set to gated for the purpose of this little demo. I'm going to switch it back to one shot. And now let's hear how it sounds. Okay, now let me pick up a thread from earlier. So I've already mentioned some of the reasons that I like to chop samples by sequencing start points. But the main reason is this. Everything that we've been talking about, every change that I made, these are all changes that live on this pattern. So if I duplicate this pattern to the next track, all of this will carry over. And this is why I lock the sample on every step. If I do that, then it doesn't matter what sample is assigned to that track. It doesn't matter what the start point was. It doesn't matter what was going on with the low pass, because these are all things that I've edited and they're in the pattern. So check this out. We're on track 2. If I go back to track 1, I've just got this kick drum here. And the pattern is empty. So now I'm going to copy this pattern from track 2 over to track 1, and I'm going to mute track 2. And now check this out. We're going to hear the exact same pattern that we've been messing around with. This is pretty important to how I like to make beats. I usually spread my melodic samples across 2 or 3 tracks so that I can filter out the lows, mids, and higher frequencies. It lets me really, shape the sound of my samples. I can also send those different frequencies to the effects at different levels. But unfortunately, the way that the slice mode works is that it's a track setting. So things like that, whether your sample plays gated or plays in reverse, these are all track settings. And unfortunately, you can't duplicate tracks or their settings. But patterns you can duplicate. And this is just one of those little things to keep in mind, even if you don't want to work like I work. If you just know you want to have a pattern play at, half speed, you can just change the one and then go into pattern view and just duplicate it to all the other patterns you want. These are just good things to know. So, yeah, I hope this has been informative. If you like this kind of thing, please like and subscribe. I'm going to try to do more of these. So if you want me to cover anything, just go ahead and let me know in the comments. And if you want to support what I do, you can always buy my music on Bandcamp. It's also pretty good. I stand by it. So, yeah, peace.